So tell me, what's the hardest group of people to bring into the church? Young single men. Yet the man I'm about to interview has built a church full of them. Thousands of them. Mars Hill Church in Seattle targets young, urban men, teaches them to follow Jesus, and changes their lives. So here's my interview with Mark Driscoll, pastor of Mars Hill Church and founder of the Acts 29 Church Planting Network. Young single men are the hardest demographic to reach.
Yeah, statistically, 18 to 34-year-old men that are single particularly are the least of the least.
Right, like 3 or 4% of the church. Yeah. How are you able to get so many of them here at Mars Hill?
We, from the very beginning, have intentionally focused. I grew up in South Seattle. My dad was a construction worker, blue-collar, drywaller, and I didn't get saved until I was 19 in college. So I pretty much understand what it's like to live in Seattle as a single guy who doesn't know Jesus. And so I just wanted to build a church that, in large part, just really focused on those guys. And so for everything we do, we tend to train, hire young men, release them for ministry to reach their buddies. So I think we're now about half married, half single, half men, half women, in about the least church city in America. But it's everything from the tone, the style, the topics we talk about, the way we specifically address men and deal with men, and portraying Jesus in a masculine way, I think, is a big deal. We like the Jesus of Revelation 19.
Yes.
Tattoo down the leg, coming for war. The hip-hop guys call him Thug Jesus. The white guys tend to call him Ultimate Fighter Jesus. But even just a view of Jesus as masculine, as powerful, as strong, as Savior, as Redeemer, as Defender. So I think it's theological, it's practical, there's a lot of elements to it. But for me, it's my heart, and I think that's the big thing. I want to see young guys who are single meet Jesus and get their life together before they get a woman pregnant, before they get married, before they have kids, because the generational devastation is just, it's very painful and almost impossible to totally correct once they've made those mistakes.
Yeah. More than 70% of the boys who are raised in church abandon it during their teens and 20s. Most never return until they're dragged back by their wives.
Yeah.
How can we stem the exodus of young men from the church?
I think part of it is you've got to let young men lead in the church. You can't just want them to come to church. It has to be their church. So unless you're training them to teach, to preach, to become pastors, deacons, to lead small groups, to run mercy ministry, unless you're really equipping and releasing young men to do something, you're not going to have young men. They're looking for places to be aggressive, to be involved, and if the church is run by old people and young people are supposed to just sit there, if I'm a guy in his 20s who's ambitious, who's young, who's aggressive, I'm gone. I want to go do something. And so for us, it's been put the young guys to work.
And you recruit those kind of guys?
Absolutely, aggressively. And the leadership from the top down, the value is find the young guys, coach the young guys, invest in the young guys, train the young guys, release the young guys. So much so that it's just the culture, the DNA of the whole church. So most of my guys get married young, they own a house young, they have kids young, they take responsibility young. Most guys are Peter Pan. They just sort of live a boy's life for a long time. I'll give you one example in our department. My department's all the video, audio, young, creative, marketing type guys. Most of those guys are new Christians, but they're getting married, they're having kids, they're serious, they're serving God. The youngest guy's 19, does our animation and our video stuff. He's dating a woman. He's getting ready to be engaged. He's making a good wage. He's almost got enough saved to have a down payment on a house.
And that's saying a lot here in Seattle.
And he's 19. How many 19-year-old guys have a good job, benefits, saving money for a down payment on a home, have their wife picked, are honoring her father, keeping their hands to themselves, and within a week or two he'll be asking for her hand in marriage, and he's in the deacon process. So by 20 he'll be a married deacon who owns a home, maybe with a kid on the way. So it's that culture of expectation. But then he's got his dignity. He's responsible, he's loves his wife, he's serving Jesus, and he's got something to do. A guy like that isn't going to sit there for 10 years and just be talked to. It doesn't encourage him.
Is today's church culture lacking in masculinity?
From the top to the bottom.
How so?
Most pastors are not really aggressive guys. They play it close to the vest. They don't talk about controversial issues. You're not going to hear about sex or marriage or gender. Most guys don't deal with marriage and family and gender issues at all. The music is usually mainstream pop Christian, which is sort of, I call it prom songs for Jesus. A lot of ladies like it, but
Yeah.
for the average guy, it's just not that compelling. Architecture, colors, design, I mean, it's way more like a Victoria's Secret than a sports bar. Even just the tone and the topics and the way that the preacher presents himself. Timid, real nice, tells good stories, really gets your heart, and just a real sweetheart of a guy, but at the end of the day, not a guy you'd go to war with. Not a guy at the end of the day that you really admire to the degree where you say, I want to be like that guy. Not really imitatable. And that's one of the goals of a leader, is to be imitatable. And I think it's because, if you grow up in a Christian home, you grow up in the church, and then you go to Bible college, and then you go to seminary, and then you become a pastor, you're just a sweetheart of a guy. But I don't think you're the kind of guy that is like the Old Testament prophets. I don't think you're a guy that's got the kind of courage that Paul did. You read the Bible, most of those guys got beaten. They got in a lot of trouble. They spent time in prison, and a lot of them got murdered. And I read the Bible and I see these strong, courageous, passionate, good, dependable men. And then you look in the pulpit and the guys that are teaching the Bible that those guys wrote, they just don't seem to be like those guys. As a general rule, they just tend to not look like those guys. And so what is it? 60% of all Christians are female. There's between 11 and 13 million more women than men in church. And over 90% of church leaders are still men. So how do you have men leading, and they can't attract men, and they can't retain men, and they can't lead men? That would indicate to me there's something wrong with the men who are leading.
Yeah, something different from what the guys we got.
Yeah, something's not working. Yeah. Something's not working.